Hi guys, my name is Pete Hutchinson, and today in this video we're talking about the DJI Mavic Pro drone. Now this is a wicked little piece of kit, and Wex Photo Video were kind enough to let me use it for a couple of weeks filming in Indonesia. I'm going to go over a couple of pros, a couple of cons, and also a few tips on how to use this drone in your video projects. I think it's only fair for me to start with some features that I like about this drone first, because it really is an amazing tool for a filmmaker. Now the first thing that I noticed, and you probably noticed as well, is the size of it. It's absolutely tiny, it's about the size of a household brick. It doesn't weigh that much, don't worry. But yeah, instead of buying a Phantom or an Inspire for a bit more money, you can get this tiny little system that fits in your backpack with all your camera gear as well, and it's just so nice to have it. You can just deploy it whenever you want, and it's just not a big deal. Another thing that I couldn't help noticing was the price of the drone. Now I think it's priced really competitively, and I think it's a real steal for what it is, because you're now in the air, adding a whole new dimension to your videos, and your clients are going to notice this. There is a bit of fiddling around and a few qualifications to do if you want to start doing drone work for commercial work, but I'd say it's worth it and a really cost-effective way to get into that industry. Some other things that I was pleasantly surprised about was the flight time. So online it says it gets about 21 minutes, but you know the manufacturer is always a bit generous with that number. In the heat of Indonesia, and there was quite a bit of wind there as well, I was getting about 15 minutes flight time. But I really found that I'd normally be flying for about 5 minutes before I landed. I think 20 minutes in the air is actually a really long flight. I was also really happy with how fast the battery is charged. Now the Mavic Pro really is geared towards videographers. So it shoots 4K 30 frames a second, which is the setting I had it on the whole trip. But it also shoots without any electronic stabilization. So this means the 4K is real 4K. It also does shoot photos, and I was really pleasantly surprised by how good they were. It has a 12.3 megapixel camera, which doesn't seem like that much, but when I zoom it in, I was actually really impressed by how much detail it held. A feature that luckily I didn't have to use was the sky autonomy. Basically what this does is senses objects that's in your path, and then it will slow down the drone or make the drone move around this object, preventing you from crashing or scraping your drone. The drone's super easy to operate, the battery just clips into the top, the arms fold out from underneath, the propellers just open up, and you're ready to go. DJI say that the Mavic Pro has 4.3 miles of range, but I wouldn't be trying that if I was you, because legally you need to have the drone within eye line. So basically that's 400 feet up and about 500 meters horizontally. So I think there's also a couple of things that the Mavic Pro could improve on. Over the 2 weeks of me using it pretty regularly, I only actually found 2 things I'd improve, which is quite impressive. But the first one being, if I was shooting in shadowed or darker areas, I found there would kind of be this magenta purple hue come up, which wasn't too much of an issue because I could just select the saturation on the shadows and pull it down and it looked fine. And then secondly, what I found were certain textures were kind of confusing the camera or sensor. I don't know how it works, but it was kind of happening a bit. And so you can see in this shot, I'm facing straight down, and as the wave sweeps through, it kind of gives this blocky sort of look to it. And then also I've got this shot of the mountain with a lot of twigs and trees, and I think there's just too much information and it confuses the camera. But like I said, over a 2-week period, this only popped up I think 2 or 3 times, and so it didn't really bother me at all, and I didn't actually have to keep it in my mind. I do also have a couple of tips for the drone, the first one being that I always shot in D-Log. Now basically what D-Log is a flat low contrast colour profile, so this means there's more details in the shadows and the highlights and also kind of less saturation, but this makes your job so much easier in post. You can pull down those highlights and kind of bring back some detail in the shadows, and it's just way better for colour grading. So another tip is to use an ND or neutral density filter on the drone. It's this tiny little filter that pops over the front of the camera, and what it does is reduces the amount of light going into the lens and camera. Now this lets you shoot at a slower shutter speed, which means you can bring that down closer to the 180-degree shutter speed rule, where your shutter speed should be double your frame rate, and this makes the blur and movement in your video way nicer. It's also worth mentioning that DJI have now released the Maverick Pro Platinum, but it's basically the same, although it can fly for 30 minutes now, and also it's a bit quieter. So as a summary, if you're looking for a small compact drone that's easy to fly and shoots amazing 4K footage, look no further.